Yes, I am a witch. Whenever I say that, people ask me questions like, how do you know you're a witch? When did you find out you were a witch? When they say things like this, I know that they know nothing at all about witchcraft. For being a witch is something you decide to do, not something that just happens to you if you're lucky. Oh, I was fortunate, for I was born into a family where witchcraft was a tradition. My mother was a witch, my grandmother, and her grandmother before her. In fact, we can trace our family background in witchcraft to somewhere in the 14th century in northern Scotland. At that time, there were three main cults of witches: the red, the blue, and the green. My family belonged to the green witch cult. It was traditional at that time for witches to smear vegetable coloring on their faces to identify with a particular cult to which they belonged. And that's the reason that I, to this day, put green food coloring on my skin for particular occasions. But being born into a family with this kind of background did not make me a witch. I became a witch when I joined a coven. A coven is a group of anywhere from 2 to 13 people who practice in the tradition of the old religion of witchcraft. This religion is very, very old. It goes back to pre-Christian, pre-Jewish times, to the very beginning of civilization. There are many Johnny-come-lately covens around today. People who want to be witches and can't get into a traditional coven have started forming their own. This is all right, I suppose. It is possible to practice magic without being a witch, and I'm going to show you how on this record. But I do object to people without the traditional belief calling themselves witches, and I wish they'd find another name, like warlock or wizard or sorceress or something of this sort, because a true witch is one who belongs to a coven that practices in that established tradition of the centuries. There are 3 main tenets to the belief of witchcraft. The first is a belief in a universal source of power from which we all come and to which we will all return. We believe that we have this power within us and that we can call on it both from within and without whenever need be. The second tenet of our belief is that of reincarnation. This means that we believe that each person has lived through many lives before this and will live through many in the future. This is important to us because it is part of our belief that eventually, when we reach perfection, we will be able to be reunited with the source from which we came. But we believe it is impossible to reach this state of perfection in only one lifetime. Now, these 2 things, the belief in a universal power, the belief in reincarnation, do not make witches very different from anyone else. The thing that makes people look upon us like we were creatures from another world is the third tenet of our belief, and that is magic. My definition for magic is anything that works that science has not been able to explain. Let me give you an example. There's an old fairy tale called Beauty and the Beast, with which most of you are probably familiar. And there's a passage in that fairy tale that I used to love very much as a child. It describes the entry of Beauty's father into the palace of the beast for the first time. It goes something like this. The doors were opened by unseen hands. The room was lighted as if by 1,000 candles, and there were no candles there. And suddenly, a voice spoke to him out of nowhere. I used to listen to this and think it was the greatest kind of magic. And now, you know it happens to every one of us every time we go to the store. The doors are opened by unseen hands and electric eye. The room is lighted as if by 1,000 candles, no candles there, fluorescent lights. And suddenly, a voice speaks to us out of nowhere, telling us to try their strawberries. They're on sale today. PA system. Now, we don't think of these things as magic because we understand what makes them work. The same thing is true of a transistor radio. We take these very much for granted. But imagine when your grandmother was a small child, if someone had given her a little black box that she could hold in the palm of her hand and turn the little dial and hear voices speaking to her from all over the world at that very moment that they were uttering these sounds. Not only that, but on certain days, she could even hear men talking on the moon. Oh, wouldn't that have been magic? But we don't think of a transistor radio as magic. It's one of the most common things that we have. Now, I, personally, do not see anything more mystical or magical or unbelievable about the idea of a thought wave traveling from my mind than I do about the idea of radio waves traveling from one place to another. The only difference is that science has not yet come up with a machine sophisticated enough for measuring those thought waves. I believe that they will someday, and when they do, then magic won't be as mystical anymore. But until that day, there's still a great deal of supernatural here about casting a spell. And that's what this record is really all about. I want to talk about your power, not mine. It really doesn't make much difference to you what power I have. The thing that is important is what power you possess. And witches really do not have any powers that anyone else doesn't possess if they wish to develop them. For we're all born with this ability if we only work on it, practice on it, and bring it out. And this is why I'm talking to you today, so that you will be able, through the little test that I'm giving you, to discover these powers within yourself and learn to cast your own spells. Every one of you, if you are honest, will have to admit that at some time in your life you have had a psychic experience. Maybe it was as simple as going to call a friend on the telephone and getting a busy signal because that person was calling you at exactly that same moment. Maybe it was writing a letter and putting it in the mail, and the very next day receiving an answer from a person who had not yet received the letter that you sent them because they wrote their letter at the same time that you wrote yours. Coincidence? Maybe. But I think it happens far too often to be coincidence. I think that it is possible for one person to act as a sender and another a receiver, and for their thoughts to go from one to another. Let me give you a little test that you can try. This is very simple. I don't know of anyone who's ever tried this and failed. Next time you're in a group of people, a restaurant, classroom, in church, on the bus, any place where people get together, and there's a person sitting with their back to you so that you can see their neck. Picture a little circle on that person's neck. Picture it outlined very, very plainly, about the size of a quarter. Stare at this circle until you can really see it. And when you can, imagine a dot right in the middle of that circle. Bear in on that dot with your glance, with your stare, for only a matter of a few seconds. That's all it will take before that person rubs that spot, because they will feel you looking there. Once you've tried this and found that you are able to concentrate your power and send it across the room, then you will begin to have the faith that is necessary for working a real spell. And once you learn to do this, there is nothing in the world that you cannot obtain. There are only 3 things necessary for casting spells. One of these is emotional involvement. This is perhaps the most important, because unless you are emotionally involved, you cannot work up the amount of power necessary to cast a spell. It doesn't make much difference what the emotion is, as long as it fits the spell. For instance, if you're working an evil spell, you may have an evil emotion. Perhaps it'll be greed, hate, vengeance. If you're working a good spell, you may have an entirely different emotion, one of love, desire, compassion. But whatever your spell is, you must have an emotion to make it work. So the first of the 3 things that you need for working a spell is that, emotion. Now, the second ingredient is equally important, and that is imagination. If you don't have a vivid imagination, you will never be able to cast a spell. For what casting a spell really amounts to is getting an idea in your own mind and getting it there so intently that you are able to send that picture to the mind of the person whom you wish to affect, so that they act upon it thinking it was their own idea. This is where all the props in magic come in. You know, the candles, the incense, the potions, the eggs, the herbs. These things have no magic. They aren't magical in any way themselves. The magic, the power, is all within you. But these things are important. They are important because they help you to focus that power. They help work on your imagination to create a mood and to help you visualize what it is that you want to happen. Let me give you an example. There was a woman who once asked me for a spell to keep her husband out of the house next door. She lived next door to a widow, and her husband was constantly going over to the widow's house to do little odd jobs for her, like shovel the snow off the walk or trim the hedges. This she didn't object to in the least. What bothered her was the fact that he would then go into the widow's house for a cup of coffee or something afterwards. And this is why she came to me for a spell. She wanted him to stay out of that house. I gave her a spell to accomplish this, something to keep him from going through the door. I'm going to use that spell now to explain to you the importance of the ingredients, the props, and the incantations in working magic, and to show you how they work on your imagination to increase the power that you have when you focus it into one place. I told this woman to get 3 ingredients and mix them together. Now remember, there's nothing magical in these ingredients at all. The magic is within the person working the spell. But these ingredients were important. The first one was dragon's blood. Oh, I can hear you laughing now. You say, what nonsense? There's nothing like dragon's blood. Well, there aren't any dragons running around that you can stick pins in. But there is something that we call dragons. That's the sap from a tree that grows in Malaysia. And when it's dried, it looks like dried blood. You can buy this in little curio shops in different parts of the city. It comes wrapped in palm leaves. And when you bring this home and unwrap your little package and take this out and think of using it in a spell, it has an effect upon your mood. It makes you ready for marriage. Can you think of anything more exciting than buying a package of dragon's blood and mixing it with other ingredients to get exactly what you want? You see, this creates a mood, and a mood is very important. The second ingredient that I told her to use was sulfur. Now, sulfur brings to most people's minds the picture of a flame. And this is exactly what I wanted her to think of. I wanted her to be able to see a fire as she works this spell. And that was the purpose of the second ingredient, sulfur. Now, the third thing that I suggested she mix in this potion was saltpeter. And saltpeter also has a connotation to most people of inhibiting her man in some way. Now, she was to mix these together and spit in it and make a paste. And take this paste at exactly midnight and go next door and spread it along the door, both at the front and the back of the house. Now, midnight, that's the witching hour. But do you know why? There are two very good reasons. First of all, if you're going to put an idea into the mind of another person, the best time to do it is when they're sleeping, when they're most receptive. And her husband is most apt to be asleep. The second reason for working a spell at that time is because you're less apt to get caught. That's very important. For if a spell is interrupted, it will not work. Now, she was to spread this both at the front and at the back door. And as she did, she was to say a little incantation that I gave her 7 times at the front and 7 times at the back of the house. This incantation was a chant, a verse, that is said over and over and over in exactly the same way, so that it has a hypnotic effect upon the person working the spell, so that they can really see what it is that they want to happen, and send that picture to the mind of their guest. The incantation that I wrote for her was a very simple one. It went like this. Man of mine, stop, I say, for here's a wall of flame. Through that wall you cannot pass, for what is mine, I claim. And she was to visualize her husband coming up to that door, seeing that wall of flame, and being unable to pass it, turning around and coming home to her. Now, it worked. It really did. She wrote me and told me exactly what happened. The very next day happened to be garbage collection day. And her husband got up very early and went over to the widow's house and took the garbage cans out of the garage and carried them out to the curb for the garbage collector. When he started back up the sidewalk, the widow came to the door and called to him and invited him to come in. He very eagerly ran up the front steps. And when he got to the door, he stopped. He talked to her for a few minutes, and he came home. His wife was watching all of this out the window. When he came home, she said, "Honey, how come you didn't go in for a cup of coffee?" And he said, "I don't know. But when she opened that door, it was so hot in there, I thought I'd suffocate." And do you see? He didn't see a wall of flame. He didn't hear his wife screaming for him to come home. But this idea was in his mind. She had planted it there in his subconscious when he was sleeping. It was there so deeply and so firmly that he actually felt the heat from that flame, and it inhibited him from going into the house next door. Now, the emotion and the imagination are the two first ingredients in working a spell. The third, and perhaps the most forceful, is that faith. For without the faith, the others do nothing. You must believe that what you are doing will be. In fact, most spells are ended in this way, by the witch or person working the spell saying, "As I say, so might it be." And now, you cast the spell. Now I'm going to give you directions to work a spell. A very special spell. In fact, it's one of the best ones I know because it can be used for almost any purpose. This is a spell using the 7-knob wishing candle. If you follow these directions exactly, there is no wish that you cannot make come true. Please realize that there is no magic in the candle. There is no magic in the ritual you are going to perform. The magic is all within you. The candle and the ritual serve only to help you focus your own power. The first thing that you should do is to consider your wish very carefully before you attempt to work the spell. And think of all the consequences. Because there are a few things in this life that don't also have some side effects that go along with them. If you are certain that this is what you really want, then you may proceed. First, you get a candle. You can either make this candle yourself or you can buy it. It should be about 4 inches long, and it should be a candle that has been molded rather than one that has been dipped. Dipped candles are in several layers, and they're very hard to carve. But a molded candle carves easily. Measure this candle and divide it into 7 equal parts. Way around the candle so that when you finish, you have a candle with 7 even knobs. Now, you may either coat this candle with a particular color, which puts you in the right mood for whatever kind of spell it is you're going to work. For instance, if you want to work a spell for money, you might want to paint the candle green. And to do this, you would melt green crayon in a spoon over a flame and simply apply it to the outside of the candle. If you're going to work a spell with this candle of a spiritual nature, you might want to paint the candle purple. If you wanted it for romance, passionate reasons, red would probably be the color you chose. If it was to help you intellectually, you might choose blue. You can choose a color which appeals to you in relationship to the spell that you're going to work, or you may use a neutral color and leave the candle white or coat it with black, either one, which are neutral colors. Now, when you have this candle finished, you are ready to begin. You notice the 7 knobs. Each one of these knobs takes about the same time to burn, and you will burn one on each of 7 nights under the following conditions. First of all, you will not eat or drink or put any foreign matter into your mouth after 5 o'clock on the nights which you will be burning this candle. It is most important that you will fast for 7 hours preceding each flame. After you've worked the ritual for that night, if you're very hungry, you may eat before you go to bed. But not for 7 hours beforehand. And don't smoke either. Don't eat, drink, or put anything in your mouth after 5 o'clock. The second thing you must do is practice complete celibacy for the entire week that you are working the spell. Now, the reason for the fasting and the celibacy are that you must give up something, so that constantly on your mind is the fact that you are doing something very special. You are sacrificing for a purpose. You are preparing yourself for a great event which will take place at midnight each night. This way you are setting a mood for yourself. Now you will begin this spell on Sunday at midnight, and you will complete the ceremony the following Saturday at midnight. You should perform this ceremony in complete solitude with nothing to disturb your thoughts. It's best to be completely naked when you perform this, but if you prefer, you may wear a loose robe without any belt. It's very important that there be no binding straps, garters, belts, elastics, or anything like that to confine your movements or to cause you discomfort during the procedure, because you must be able to give every bit of your attention to the spell that you are working. Under no circumstances should you wear any shoes. Now, at precisely 12 o'clock on Sunday night, you will light the candle and burn the first knob. While it's burning, you'll gaze into the flame continuously until the entire knob is burned away. Then you will extinguish the flame, and the next night you will burn the next knob. While you are gazing into this flame, you will chant your wish over and over. Now, you must make certain that it is only one wish. Don't use any ands. Don't try to get a second wish in there, or a wish with special limitations. It must be a simple statement, one wish. And it has to be stated over and over exactly the same way. You must use the same words in the same order and state it the same way each night and each time that you say. Repeat it over and over in a chanting sort of way, and think no other thought. Do this each night for 6 nights, and on the 7th night, you will do the same thing, but you will not extinguish the flame. You will allow it to burn itself out. And when this happens, collect the wax drippings that are left and wrap them in a piece of clean, unbleached muslin that has never been used for any other purpose. Tie it securely with a piece of red cotton thread knotted 7 times, and bury it in the ground where no one will find it. When you have completed all this, you'll be very tired. Following this exact ritual for an entire week will tire even the most hardy. That is why so few people are really successful with it. You know, they have trouble making their wishes come true because they tire of the strain and they give up before completing the entire ceremony. But if you are able to complete it, when you're finished, drink 3 ounces of fermented fruit juice and go to bed. When you wake the next morning, you should discover that your wish is already coming true. The second spell that I'm going to give you is done with a bulb. Go to the supermarket or a nursery or any place where they sell flower bulbs and buy an amaryllis bulb. Amaryllis come in 3 shades: red, white, and pink. Choose a red one for passion. Bring the bulb home and remove it from the package carefully. Hold it in your hand and christen it with the name of the one that you desire. Then plant this bulb, according to the directions on the package, in a little pot. Each day, care for it. Love it. Talk to it as though it were the person you have in mind. Call it by his name. Say hello and goodbye to the plant when you enter and leave the room. Say good morning and good night to the plant. Tell it of your love. say the things to this plant that you would like to say to this man. You'll be amazed at the speed with which this plant will grow. The more love that you put into it, the faster it will grow. And as it grows, so will his love for you. And when it blossoms, he will contact you, and you will be together. This is a spell for a man to work to obtain the love of a woman. First of all, you must obtain something from that woman's body. A lock of hair, a tear, a drop of blood, perhaps a nail clipping, something of this sort. You must also have some natural beeswax. Now, don't buy bleached or white beeswax for this spell. Get natural beeswax. Best if you can go somewhere where bees are raised and honey is sold and buy it there. If not, you can often find it in a hardware store. Melt the beeswax down and add to it whatever it is that you have from the young lady's body, her tears or drop of blood or hair or whatever. Melt this and then set it aside to cool. Now, as it cools so that you can begin handling it without burning your hands, form it into the likeness of the one whose love you desire. You don't have to be a great sculptor or a great artist. Just do the very best that you can with this, and imagine as you shape this wax, before it hardens, imagine this wax representing that person. Think of that person as you are shaping this little doll. Now, make it look as much like the person that you desire as you possibly can. Then, when you have finished shaping the doll, take a new steel needle and with it write the name of the girl you desire on the front and the back of the little wax image. Now you must wrap this image in a piece of cloth. It is best if you have a piece of the girl's clothing or a scarf or handkerchief that she's used. If you don't have one of these, use a clean piece of unbleached muslin. Wrap the doll carefully so as not to break it, and put it someplace where the girl will pass over it. Now, in years gone by, when a boy worked the spell, he would dig a hole in the path and bury the doll, and the girl would pass over this place on the path, and then he would dig it up. Nowadays, everything is concrete, and this is kind of a difficult thing to do. So what I would suggest is that you put it under her porch, if she has a porch that you can get underneath, and put the doll there, so that she has to walk over it as she goes up the steps and into the house. If she doesn't have this kind of porch, you might try putting it under the seat of a chair that she will sit in, or under the davenport, or perhaps under the car seat that she will be riding on. Anyway, wherever you put it, you leave it there until you know for sure that this girl has passed over the spot where the doll was. Then you take the doll and very carefully, again, so that you don't break it, unwrap the cloth and put something of yolk on the doll, preferably teardrops. Surely if you love this girl this much, you can get up a few tears for her. And shed a few tears, if you possibly can, and sprinkle them onto this little wax image. Now take the wax image to a fire and hold it over the flame using tongs so that you don't burn your fingers. Hold this doll over the flame and turn it so that it begins to melt and drip into the fire. And as it does, repeat this. Mary, your heart will melt with love for me. You will burn with desire. Chant this over and over and over until the doll has melted away, and the girl will be yours. spell is one that can be used by either a man or a woman. It is a traditional love philter. There's only one drawback to this. It will not work from a distance, as will the other spells that we just used. This one involves putting something into the food of the one that you desire. It works this way. You must get 7 coriander seeds and crush them with a mortar and pestle. Now, if you do not have a little mortar and pestle, then you may put them on a piece of wax paper and put another piece of wax paper over the top and crush them by rolling a heavy rolling pin over them. This method will work too. Also, crush 1 rose tip and a pinch of rosemary. Mix these together and place them in a clean, new cup, one that has never been used. Now, over the coriander, rosehip, and rosemary mixture, pour 1/4 of a cup of distilled water. You can buy distilled water at any drugstore. Allow this to sit for 24 hours. Then strain this through a piece of cheesecloth or perhaps one of the new disposable coffee filters. And you take the clear liquid that you obtain from straining this and put it in a little bottle. This is your love filter. Next time that you are with this person when they are eating or drinking something, contrive to pour this into their food or drink. And according to tradition, they will love you forever after. This is a spell to discourage an unwanted suitor. You will need these things: a black candle, a white candle, a bottle of black ink, some paraffin wax, a rose of deep red hue, and a photograph of the person you wish to discourage. First, you must prepare the rose. You do this by picking little holes in the petals to form your own initials. When you've done this, melt the paraffin in a pot and quickly dip the rose up and down in the paraffin wax so that it fills up the hole and your initials stand out from the color of the rose. Then, stand the rose with the stem in the bottle of black ink and leave it this way for several hours so that the ink will seep up into the rose and dye the petals black. When this has happened, you are ready to proceed with the actual spell. Lay the picture of the one that you wish to discourage on the floor in front of you and place the black rose over the picture. Stand the white candle to one side of the picture and the black candle to the other side. Light the candle and repeat after me the following incantation. Wild and whirling spirits are in my thoughts. Demons are in my mind. This man is the object of my distemper, so that I may find relief and relief. This rose infuses with magic to carry a dire warning to him. Cease your suit, or so beware! When you have completed this, wrap the rose in black tissue and place it in a box. Leave this box on the doorstep just outside the door of the one you wish to discourage, and he will bother you no more.